What happens when your own grandchildren block you online, only to see you become an internet sensation? Helen turned heartbreak into inspiration, and soon the whole world was watching. What happened next changed her family forever. Helen never thought much about social media until the day she discovered she'd been blocked by her own grandchildren. It was a Tuesday, rain spattered the kitchen window, and she was baking banana bread, the way she always did when she missed the chaos of her family. She liked to check in on her grandchildren, scrolling through their latest photos on Instagram and leaving little comments. Always supportive, sometimes a touch embarrassing, she had to admit. "So handsome," on a mirror selfie. "Is that skirt warm enough, darling?" under a beach photo. Her granddaughter Katie usually replied with a heart. Her grandson Adam, not as much, but she liked seeing the world through his eyes. That morning, Helen tried to view Katie's story but saw a gray message, "No posts yet." Odd. She checked Adam's profile, nothing but a cartoon avatar and an empty grid. Puzzled, Helen texted Katie. No reply. She called her daughter Claire, who hesitated before saying, "Oh, Mom, the kids are just busy. You know how teenagers are." Helen's stomach tightened. She might be 73, but she wasn't naive. A quick search on the family iPad revealed the truth. Both grandchildren had blocked her. It felt like a slap. At first, Helen was hurt, really hurt. She spent the rest of the day in a haze, her cheerful kitchen suddenly too quiet, the smell of banana bread making her chest ache. She replayed every comment, every cute or adorable she'd ever typed, wondering if she'd crossed some invisible line. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, that teenagers were fickle, but the ache lingered. Even her best friend, Shirley, noticed at their weekly Scrabble game. "You look like you swallowed a lemon, Helen. Out with it." Helen confessed everything, her voice trembling between anger and embarrassment. Shirley, ever blunt, set her tiles down and snorted. "Oh, please. Let them sulk in their little corner of the internet. You don't need them to be seen. Besides, you'd have more followers than them if you tried." Helen laughed at the idea, but Shirley's words took root. That night, alone in her cozy bedroom, Helen signed up for a new Instagram account, one her grandchildren didn't know about. She used her maiden name and uploaded a picture of herself in her gardening hat, cheeks pink, eyes shining. Her first post was a photo of her banana bread, recipe in the caption. She tagged it #Grandma's Kitchen, #BakingJoy, and #LifeAfter70. To her shock, a handful of strangers liked the photo within an hour. One left a comment, "Looks delicious. Do you have the recipe in cups or grams?" Helen replied, pleased at the polite curiosity. She posted more the next day, her roses in bloom, a photo of Shirley holding up a winning Scrabble word, her new knitting project. She began following other accounts, grandmothers from Scotland, home cooks in Texas, dog lovers in New Zealand. Some followed her back. Their comments felt warmer than any emoji her grandchildren had ever sent. Days passed, and Helen's little account began to blossom. She tried a video, awkward at first, her hands shaking as she filmed herself kneading dough. But viewers responded with kindness, sharing tips and encouragement. "You're a natural, Helen. Love your accent. Please make scones next." The feedback was a bomb. Each like was a tiny act of recognition, proof she wasn't invisible after all. When Shirley heard the news, she burst out laughing. "You're going to be famous. Next, you'll be doing unboxing videos." Emboldened, Helen tried a story, a quick clip of her morning coffee and garden walk. To her surprise, it was watched over 100 times. She learned hashtags, tried silly filters, and even responded to a few DMs. The messages made her laugh. One young woman wanted advice on mending a torn coat, another, baking tips for a fussy toddler. Helen's account, @HelenAfter70, caught the attention of a local newspaper after a young reporter found her video on baking jam tarts. The article, "Grandma Helen, Inspiring Joy Online," was shared on Facebook and Twitter. Suddenly, Helen's phone buzzed non-stop. Old friends, church acquaintances, neighbors, and complete strangers sent messages of congratulations. Claire was the first in the family to notice. She called, half accusing, half admiring, "Mom, are you going viral?" Helen laughed, nerves tingling. "Well, if being myself is viral, I suppose I am." By the end of the week, Helen had over 1,000 followers, a hashtag of her own, #HelenBakes, and a long list of video requests. The pain of being blocked by her grandchildren had faded, replaced by something new, purpose, connection, and a kind of joy she hadn't expected. But in quiet moments, she still wondered, would Adam or Katie ever notice the world she'd built right under their noses? Helen awoke the next morning to the gentle ping of her phone. A half-dozen new comments and several direct messages awaited her. She smiled, marveling at how quickly her little corner of the internet had grown. After breakfast, she filmed a video making her signature scones, laughing when flour dusted her nose and letting viewers in on her secret for extra fluffy dough. Within hours, the video was flooded with hearts and shares, and someone had tagged a popular Silver Creators page, which reposted the clip to an even wider audience. With each post, Helen's confidence grew. She experimented with reels, short, snappy videos showing her knitting, arranging flowers, or simply sipping tea in the garden and talking about her day. Messages poured in from all over the world: a widower in Wales who'd lost his wife, a young mother in Canada struggling to bake her first loaf of bread, a college student in Japan who loved Helen's cheerful, "Good morning, friends." Shirley became a fixture in the background, offering running commentary and shamelessly hamming it up for the camera. Helen's garden tours became especially popular. People tuned in for glimpses of her roses, advice on fighting aphids, and the sound of her laughter drifting over birdsong. She began to get tagged in viewers' own garden photos, inspired by @HelenAfter70. Some asked her to review gadgets or answer questions about keeping flowers blooming into autumn. For the first time in ages, Helen felt genuinely needed. Soon, invitations rolled in. The local radio station wanted to interview her. A small publisher reached out about a possible Helen's Kitchen recipe pamphlet. The biggest shock was an email from the producers of a daytime TV talk show. Would she consider flying to London for a segment on boomer influencers? Helen gasped, nearly dropping her phone. "Shirley, you'd better iron my best blouse." Meanwhile, word of Helen's success continued to ripple through town. She was stopped at the market by strangers asking for baking advice. Children waved at her from playgrounds. Even the usually grumpy librarian asked for her jam tart recipe. The church pastor invited her to host a charity bake sale, promising her video audience would double the turnout. Helen agreed, nervous but excited, and immediately began experimenting with new recipes for the occasion. Claire, her daughter, watched all this unfold with a mixture of bewilderment and pride. She started following Helen's account, publicly this time, often liking posts but rarely commenting. At Sunday dinner, Claire teased, "You know, you're getting a bit famous, Mum. Don't let it go to your head." Adam and Katie, however, barely looked up from their phones. Helen tried not to mind, focusing on the outpouring of support from her growing digital family. Still, the old hurt lingered, especially when her grandchildren barely acknowledged her in person. It stung when she saw them laughing at memes and viral trends, never realizing their own grandmother was trending herself. Shirley urged her to let them come around in their own time, but Helen sometimes wondered if they'd ever see her as more than just an embarrassing old lady. The day of the charity bake sale arrived bright and breezy. Helen's table overflowed with scones, tarts, lemon drizzle cake, and her famous banana bread. Fans from her account drove in from nearby towns to meet her, many bringing flowers or little gifts. Some wanted selfies. The vicar made a speech about community in the digital age, and Helen beamed as she handed out recipe cards and signed her first apron. That afternoon, Helen live-streamed the sale to her followers. Shirley narrated, cracking jokes and interviewing attendees. At the end of the day, the bake sale raised more than any previous year, enough to refurbish the church kitchen and start a community garden. The local paper ran a story the next morning, "Helen after 70, the internet's sweetest star." But it was a comment under the article that made Helen's heart skip. "Isn't that Adam's gran?" Other teens chimed in, tagging Adam and Katie, sharing Helen's posts, and speculating about her sudden online fame. At dinner that night, Adam's tone was different. He seemed thoughtful, if not quite ready to talk. Katie scrolled through her phone, stealing glances at Helen. Claire just smiled, quietly proud of the woman her mother had become. As the house settled into evening, Helen sipped tea by the window, her heart full and her mind buzzing with ideas. She realized that while she missed her grandchildren's attention, she was no longer waiting for their approval. She'd found a whole new world, and it was only getting bigger. The days following the charity bake sale were a whirlwind for Helen. Her phone rarely stopped pinging. Interview requests, brand inquiries, fan messages, and recipes from strangers flooded her inbox. Helen, unused to this level of attention, spent her mornings answering messages in her sunroom, sometimes laughing aloud at the creativity of her followers. One fan stitched a cross-stitched tea towel with the words, "Helen's kitchen is always open," which Helen proudly displayed in her next post. A producer from the London talk show called to confirm travel plans. "We'll send a car to pick you up, Helen. Just bring your best stories, and perhaps that banana bread." Helen practiced her stories in the mirror, running through punchlines with Shirley, who insisted on coming along to keep you from getting a big head. When Helen's granddaughter Katie caught wind of the invitation, her curiosity was piqued. "Are you really going to be on TV, Gran?" Helen nodded, feigning nonchalance, though inside she felt like a schoolgirl with a secret. On the morning of the trip, Helen donned her favorite blue scarf and the pearl brooch she'd inherited from her mother. Shirley took endless photos, documenting everything from the taxi ride to their arrival at the bustling studio. The backstage was a flurry of activity, stylists, producers, and other guests all preparing for the broadcast. Helen was treated to professional makeup, and a wardrobe assistant even steamed her best blouse. Backstage, Helen met two other boomer influencers, a Scottish gardener with a YouTube channel and a retired chef who taught cooking online. They swapped stories, laughing at their surprise at being celebrities so late in life. When it was time for Helen's segment, she was ushered onto a bright, cozy set and introduced to the host, who greeted her like an old friend. They talked about baking, gardening, aging with joy, and the funny way her life had changed overnight. Helen shared her banana bread recipe live, grinning as the host declared it the best in Britain. After the show, Helen's follower count exploded. Hundreds of messages poured in, some from fans, some from strangers who'd just discovered her. The talk show shared a clip on social media that quickly racked up thousands of views. Local reporters called again, eager to feature Helen's story in the regional news. Returning home, Helen was greeted with flowers from neighbors and cards from her church group. Even the librarian created a Helen's Picks display featuring cookbooks and gardening guides. The town's children greeted her as a celebrity, waving as she walked to the market. Her next video, unwrapping all the fan mail, was her most popular yet. Meanwhile, the atmosphere at family dinners grew more complicated. Katie and Adam whispered together, occasionally glancing at Helen's phone when it buzzed. Once, Katie pulled Helen aside. "Gran, my friends are following you now. They said your lemon drizzle cake looked better than my birthday cake." Helen hugged her, grinning. "Maybe next time, you can bake with me and show them how it's really done." Adam, less forthcoming, kept his distance, but his questions to Claire betrayed a quiet interest. "Is Gran really getting paid for this? Does she have sponsors?" Claire shrugged, clearly amused by her children's sudden awareness of their grandmother's fame. Despite the fun, Helen sometimes felt the ache of what had started it all, the sting of being blocked, the longing for her grandchildren's approval. Shirley reminded her, "Look at all you've done, Helen. Not for them, but for you. Don't let anyone dim that light." Emboldened, Helen accepted more invitations. She spoke at a local women's club, started a weekly live tea hour, and agreed to collaborate with a young home cook in town. Fans sent in questions for a Q&A, eager to know everything from her favorite scone filling to her advice for making friends later in life. Helen noticed her audience was growing younger, too. Teens started sharing her baking hacks on TikTok, and one made a remix of her best gardening tips set to pop music. The internet had officially adopted Gran Helen, and she, in turn, adopted them right back. But as her world widened, the space between her and her grandchildren remained. Helen wondered what it would take for Adam and Katie to truly see her, not just as their old-fashioned gran, but as someone worth following, too. With every passing week, Helen's digital footprint grew. Her inbox overflowed with invitations, guest spots on podcasts, collaborations with other creators, and a standing invitation from the radio station to share Helen's weekly wisdom. She created a content calendar, something she'd never imagined needing, color-coding baking, gardening, and storytime sessions. Shirley joked, "You're busier than the mayor." One chilly morning, Helen filmed her first Ask Me Anything live stream. She perched on a stool in her sunlit kitchen, answering questions from followers around the world. "What's your go-to rainy day recipe? How do you get your roses so full? What's the secret to making friends after 70? Helen responded with warmth and candor, mixing stories from her own life with practical advice. The live chat was a whirl of hearts and laughter, and by the end, Helen's following had jumped by another 1,000. Meanwhile, the local school invited Helen to lead a workshop on digital kindness and connecting generations. The principal, who'd watched Helen's rise online, hoped her story would inspire students to see social media differently. Helen was nervous. She hadn't been in a classroom since her own children were little, but Shirley went along for moral support, brandishing her phone and promising to go viral herself if needed. Standing at the front of the classroom, Helen spoke about loneliness, connection, and how her journey began. Sometimes, people shut you out. But sometimes, that's your chance to find a whole new crowd to let in. Students listened, some smirking at first, then gradually warming to her honesty. Katie sat near the back, cheeks pink. When Helen shared the story of being blocked by her own grandchildren, a wave of giggles swept the room, but then came applause as Helen described how she turned disappointment into a new adventure. After the workshop, several students, including Katie, approached Helen with questions. Do you really bake everything from scratch? Can you teach us to knit? Will you follow me back? Helen grinned, promising to answer every DM. Even the teachers lingered to ask for her scone recipe. For the first time, Katie looked genuinely proud, snapping a selfie with her grandmother and sharing it on her story, "Gran's a legend." That night, Helen's Instagram inbox filled with messages from students. Thanks, questions, and requests for collabs. The hashtag #GranHelen trended locally, and Helen's knitting videos found a new, younger audience. Shirley joked that soon Helen would need a talent agent, and offered her services for free. At the same time, Helen was approached by a charity supporting digital literacy for seniors. They wanted her to be the face of a new campaign, teaching older adults how to connect online and fight isolation. Helen agreed, delighted by the chance to give back. She filmed a heartfelt video, sharing her own story and inviting others to join her. The campaign's launch was a hit, featured on national news. Family dinners became livelier. Katie proudly recounted her Gran's classroom triumph, and Adam grudgingly admitted, "Some of my mates actually follow you now, Gran. They say your bread's legit." Helen beamed, offering to teach him her top-secret cinnamon roll recipe. Adam smirked, but this time didn't say no. Claire, watching her mother and children reconnect, felt a new respect for Helen. "You've built something special, Mom. I never realized how much you still had to give." Helen squeezed her hand. "I didn't either, until the world gave me a little nudge." One evening, Helen hosted a virtual tea party, with guests from 4 continents tuning in to bake, chat, and swap stories. Adam and Katie both joined from their phones, quietly watching as their grandmother held court, fielding questions with humor and warmth. When a viewer asked, "How did you get started, Helen?" she smiled at the camera, her eyes bright. "It all began when I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to shine." That night, Helen scrolled through hundreds of messages, some from people who'd felt left out or ignored, thanking her for inspiring them to try something new. The ache of being blocked was gone, replaced by a newfound pride. She had started alone, but she'd built a whole world, one story, one loaf, one connection at a time. With each passing week, Helen's story reached further, her little Instagram page blossoming into a global community. A French food blogger shared her recipe for jam tarts. A group of retirees in Australia invited her to co-host a Tea and Tales session via video chat. She even received a handwritten letter from a woman in South Africa, thanking Helen for her gardening tips and enclosing a photo of her own rose bush, now thriving. Helen's kitchen became a filming studio. Shirley taped, behind-the-scenes, videos of mishaps and laughter, which quickly became fan favorites. Followers requested longer tutorials, so Helen started a weekly series, Bakes with Helen, demonstrating everything from Victoria sponge to Yorkshire pudding, sprinkling each episode with stories from her childhood and her favorite Nana tricks. Her accent, her laugh, and her gentle wit became a comfort to thousands. Local businesses took notice. The bakery displayed Helen scones in the window, and the florist created a Helen bouquet, a riot of pink and lavender inspired by her garden posts. The town council invited Helen to open the annual spring fair, where she gave a speech about embracing change and cherishing community. Children waved Team Helen banners and queued for autographs, many clutching recipe cards she'd signed. Meanwhile, Adam finally relented and asked Helen to teach him to bake bread. On a rainy Saturday, they worked side by side, flour everywhere, as Helen explained how to judge dough by touch and when to trust your instincts. Adam laughed, genuine, unguarded laughter, and snapped a selfie with Helen, posting it to his own story with the caption, "Learning from the OG." Katie joined in, and soon the kitchen was crowded, warm, and loud with music and playful bickering. Shirley, delighted with Helen's success, organized a subscriber meetup at the park. Fans arrived from nearby towns, bringing homemade bakes and garden bouquets. Helen gave hugs, tasted cakes, and posed for endless photos. Several seniors confessed they'd never posted online until they'd found Helen. Now they had Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. Helen beamed at the ripple effect. She hadn't just found her voice, she'd helped others find theirs. Later that week, the charity Helen supported for digital literacy invited her to give the keynote address at their annual gala. Helen stood on stage in a dress Shirley insisted was her color, looking out at a sea of faces. She told her story, of being blocked, of starting over, of building community and never giving up on connection. By the end, the crowd was on its feet, and Helen's inbox overflowed with messages from people ready to try, to reach out, to be seen. At home, Helen reflected on how much her life had changed. The quiet ache that once filled her kitchen had been replaced by the bustle of new friendships, family dinners, and the steady hum of possibility. Even Claire admitted, "You're the busiest woman I know, Mum. I hope I can keep up when I'm your age." That evening, Helen sat at her garden table as dusk fell, answering messages from friends old and new. Adam sent her a meme, Katie tagged her in a challenge video, and Claire shared a selfie with the caption, "Proud daughter of at Helen after 70. Helen smiled, feeling the circle complete. She had lost something, yes, but she'd gained far more: confidence, purpose, and the unshakable joy of being herself in a world that was finally paying attention. Spring melted into a summer of activity and acclaim for Helen. Her Bakes with Helen series was picked up by a lifestyle magazine's YouTube channel, bringing in thousands of new subscribers from around the world. Her inbox became a trove of recipes, letters, and invitations to join video chats, online cooking battles, and even a cross-country bake-along challenge with fellow grandmothers from 3 continents. Helen's influence spread beyond the kitchen. She launched a campaign with a digital literacy charity, helping older adults learn how to connect with friends and family online. She appeared in a heartfelt video with Shirley, showing the basics of video calls and group chats. The campaign quickly went viral, covered by local news and shared by dozens of senior centers. Meanwhile, family life took on a new warmth. Adam, once dismissive, became a regular in Helen's kitchen, sometimes as her assistant, sometimes as the star. Together they started a mini-series, Gran and Grandson Bake Off, where they tackled trending recipes sent in by fans. Katie, not to be left out, produced a Gardening with Gran series, filming Helen's tips for battling slugs, growing fragrant herbs, and creating bouquets for every season. The grandchildren's friends became devoted followers, often asking for shout-outs or requesting guest appearances. Community recognition followed. The mayor presented Helen with a Community Builder Award at the Summer Fete, and a mural featuring her and Shirley was unveiled on the wall of the local community center. Helen with her flour-dusted hands, Shirley with her trademark mischievous grin. Helen blushed at the attention, but the pride in her children's and grandchildren's faces made her heart swell. Family dinners changed, too. Instead of quiet, distracted meals, there was laughter, teasing, and talk of new projects. Adam confided he'd started helping a neighbor set up a social media page for her pet-sitting business, inspired by Helen's confidence. Katie shared that several teachers at school had asked her to host a class on digital storytelling. Even Claire, once skeptical, admitted she'd learned a thing or two from her mother's resilience and openness. One weekend, Helen and Shirley organized an intergenerational picnic at the park. Subscribers, neighbors, and families gathered for a day of baking, crafts, and music. Adam DJ'd, Katie led a scavenger hunt, and Helen hosted a bake-off judged by the youngest guests. The event was filled with joy and unlikely friendships, the generations mixing effortlessly. Shirley caught Helen's eye and winked, whispering, "Who would have thought being blocked could be the best thing to happen to you?" That evening, Helen posted a photo of the picnic, a crowd of smiling faces, cake crumbs, and sun-dappled laughter. The caption read, "We're never too old or too young to make new friends. Thank you for making my world bigger and sweeter every day." As night fell, Helen sat in her cozy kitchen, contentment settling around her like a quilt. She checked her messages, replying to followers around the globe, her heart full. She thought of how much she'd learned, how far she'd come, and how bright the future suddenly seemed. The late summer sun poured into Helen's kitchen as she set up for another live broadcast. This time, an international Grandma's Bake-Off, with partners in Canada, Australia, and Ireland. Shirley arranged the phone, fussing over lighting, while Adam helped test the sound and Katie decorated the backdrop with bouquets picked from Helen's garden. Messages poured in as followers from every corner of the world tuned in, some in pajamas, some just back from work, all eager to be part of Helen's latest adventure. The bake-off was a riot of accents, laughter, and mishaps. Helen's bread nearly overproofed, the Canadian Nana Sue dropped her rolling pin, and the Australian Grand June managed to coax a neighbor's cockatoo into her kitchen for a cameo. Thousands watched and cheered as Helen laughed, traded tips, and praised everyone's efforts. At the end, Helen declared everyone a winner and shared a toast with her fellow grandmothers, raising her teacup to the screen, to friendship, to flour, and to never giving up on fun. The broadcast trended on social media. Local news stopped by Helen's house for a follow-up interview, capturing the infectious chaos of her home, the kitchen table overflowing with bakes, the back door swinging as fans and neighbors popped in with questions or just to say hello. The mayor dropped off a bouquet with a note, "Thank you for making our town a little brighter, Helen." As autumn neared, Helen's impact was felt everywhere. Senior centers reached out for workshops, schools asked her to speak about bridging generational gaps, and parents requested her advice for bringing families together online. Helen launched a Connect and Create club at the library, pairing teens with older adults to teach each other recipes, crafts, and tech skills. The pilot program was a huge success, and plans were made to expand it countywide. At home, the changes were even sweeter. Adam, who'd once blocked his gran to avoid embarrassment, became her biggest champion. He moderated her live stream chats, managed her growing inbox, and started dreaming up new gran and grandson challenges. Katie became Helen's on-camera producer, brainstorming topics and filming every triumph and blooper. Claire marveled at the laughter and energy now filling their home, grateful for how Helen had healed old wounds and sparked something new in all of them. One golden evening, Helen and Shirley sat on the back steps, watching Adam and Katie play cards with neighborhood kids while music drifted from the kitchen. Shirley nudged Helen, grinning. "Remember when you were sad about being blocked?" Helen laughed, a sound full of happiness and wonder. "Now I wish I had more hours in the day just to keep up." Helen's online community, once just a handful of curious strangers, now felt like an extended family. Each day brought new stories, new faces, and a sense of connection that crossed every border and generation. Helen realized her influence had become something lasting, a gentle revolution of kindness, creativity, and courage. As the sky deepened and the first stars appeared, Helen reflected on how loss could open doors to unimaginable joy. The ache that had once haunted her was gone, replaced by gratitude for every comment, every video call, every meal shared. She knew her story was still being written, and that there were always new friends, new adventures, and new recipes just waiting to be discovered. As autumn's golden leaves drifted down, Helen's world felt bigger and warmer than she had ever imagined. She woke each day to messages from around the globe, photos of grandchildren in gardens, videos of first-time bakers proudly holding up scones, and notes from seniors thanking her for helping them find their voice online. Her kitchen, once quiet and a little lonely, now buzzed with laughter, stories, and the hum of possibility. Helen's Connect and Create club flourished. Teens and seniors crowded into the library every week, trading recipes, Instagram tips, and life stories. Newspapers ran features on the program, and Helen was invited to speak at a regional conference about digital inclusion. She brought Shirley and her family along, turning each trip into another mini-adventure, never missing a chance to post behind-the-scenes photos for her followers. Family dinners were full of warmth and noise. Adam and Katie debated the best angles for filming, Claire tried new recipes she'd learned from Helen's fans, and even Shirley's famous fruitcake, once a running joke, found its way onto the table, quickly disappearing. Helen's heart swelled as she watched her family and friends gathered close, their laughter echoing through the house. On her 74th birthday, Helen's online family surprised her with a flood of videos and messages. Followers baked her favorite treats, recreated her garden arrangements, and sent digital cards filled with gratitude. The mayor stopped by with a proclamation declaring Helen after 70 Day, and the local choir serenaded her on her doorstep, neighbors waving from every lawn. That evening, as the festivities faded and Helen washed dishes with Adam and Katie, she paused to look at the home she'd built, online and off. She remembered the sting of being blocked, the emptiness that followed, and how she'd found her voice again, stronger than ever. Adam handed her a fresh-baked scone, grinning. "Couldn't have done this without you, Gran." Katie hugged her, whispering, "We're so proud of you." After everyone left, Helen sat in her favorite armchair, the window open to the cool night air. She picked up her phone and posted one last photo, a selfie, smiling, with a caption that read, "When one door closes, another opens. Thank you for walking through it with me. The adventure's just begun." As the stars twinkled above, Helen knew her journey was far from over. She was an influencer, a grandmother, a friend, and, most of all, herself, seen, heard, and cherished in a world that had become so much sweeter.